just put down and it just like
Yeah.
going.
How? Should we bring it?
Hi, this is our third update for Project Remediation. Over the past year, our team has been closely working with the community in Chiang Mai to restore and reimagine the quarry pond as a safe and sustainable shared space. When we first began, the pond faced serious challenges. It had a long history as a quarry site and waste dumping ground, which left villagers concerned about water quality and the risk of fishing or daily use. To address these concerns, we partnered with Chiang Mai University to conduct water and fish testing. The results showed that while pesticide residues were not detected, bacterial contamination in the water was very high, and the fish carried slightly elevated levels of heavy metals. This meant that the pond was not safe for consumption, and it confirmed the need for continued monitoring and community education on safe water practices. At the same time, we wanted to make the pond more usable and sustainable for the villagers. During our field trips, we installed a large net system that sections off part of the quarry. This was a big technical challenge, but by carefully balancing the ropes, weights, and floats, we successfully created a controlled space within the pond. The net is now anchored across the quarry, supported by bamboo and buoyancy aids added by our local partners. This cordon section became the foundation of our next step, introducing floating planters. By providing a space where plants could grow without being immediately consumed by fish, these planters can help to absorb contaminants in the water and serve as a source of income. Gardening and agriculture have always been interests among the villagers, and the planter boxes offered a new way to reclaim the pond for productive use. Through these efforts, we've made real progress towards our original goals: improving water quality, restoring ecological balance, and creating opportunities for community engagement. Now, I'll hand it over to my teammates to explain more about our recent efforts.
For our floating planter design, we did our research and found two designs that we really liked. We ultimately went with the second design because we felt that it was more robust, being able to hold already grown larger plants better rather than just seedlings. This is also more catered to our goal of assisting already grown water lilies grow further. The other reason why we preferred the second design was the use of commonly found materials such as PVC pipes, zip ties, and nettings, which we were much more confident in sourcing for in Chiang Mai. The concept behind our floating planter is simple. We use PVC pipes and glue it airtight to have as much buoyancy as possible. And as a precaution, we stuff the PVC pipes with empty bottles to retain buoyancy even in the case of water leaking into the pipes. This means that we had to source large and wide enough PVC pipes to contain bottles and retain as much air as possible. We also implemented more guardrails by gluing and duct taping the pipes together, ensuring it is both waterproof and resistant to leaking. For the base of our floating island, we used a sturdy and stiff, dense, garden netting material that we zip tied to the PVC frame. The rationale behind this was to ensure that the base can withstand the weight of the larger plants that we plan to put on it, but at the same time, large enough meshing to allow for good water flow. We thought that this balance of rigidity and flexibility is optimal for our plant's growth. On top of the floating planter design that we have researched, we decided to use our own modifications as well. Firstly, rather than using pots, we used lightweight plastic trays to house our plants. The water lilies that we plan on growing needs an abundance of water and requires a very specific depth for optimal growth. So, we decided that our floating planter should be designed in such a way that we can add or remove plastic bottles from the frame to control the buoyancy, ensuring that the water lilies have the ideal water level at all times. Our plastic trays are also designed for our water lilies growths, having 2x2 cm holes neatly lined across our tray, with gaps just large enough for the lilies' roots to grow through and gain stability. While the roots are growing, we use clay from the garden to hold the soil in place and support the water lilies before they take root on our floating planters.
Hi. So for this part of the project, I wanted to talk about how we actually built and launched our floating planter rafts. I want to talk about the little challenges and the improvisations we had to make on the ground, and of course the final launch itself. First up was procuring the materials. To do this, we visited a big building supply retailer, Thai Wat Sadu, and thankfully most of what we needed was pretty straightforward to find. We got our PVC pipes, netting and zip ties, all of that went pretty smoothly. But we also had to make our first adjustment early on. Instead of going with the original big 1 meter by 2 meter raft like we had originally planned, we decided to downscale. We built 3 separate planters instead, each roughly 70 to 80 centimeters squared. And the reasoning for this was pretty simple. We decided that smaller units would be easier to maneuver, easier to load on a boat, and just safer for us to launch, especially since this was meant to really be an initial experiment to see whether the planter idea could even work. So this means that we changed some of the PVC connectors that we wanted to buy. And the second thing we had to procure was the plants. The original idea was actually to get giant lily pads, but unfortunately, when we went to the store, we found out that they were completely out of stock with a 2 to 3 month backlog. And obviously, we were already there on the ground and we couldn't really wait. So we decided to improvise. We talked to the shop owner and we decided to go with smaller, more affordable breed of water lilies. And this turned out to be much more affordable and perfect for testing at this initial phase. So we picked up 6 pots of these small water lilies, as well as some clay for the planting trays. And finally, we moved on to the building section. So on the ground, it was pretty straightforward. We just need to saw the PVC pipes into the right length, about 70 centimeters sections. And the main challenges were just making sure that the structure remained watertight and that the sides were all perfectly even. Any imbalances would probably mean that the raft would be unbalanced and it could warp or tilt once it hit the water. And then there was also the issue of clay. Clay is pretty heavy, so we had to strike a balance of having enough clay such that the plants could take root in the planter, but not so much that the raft risked sinking. So our first prototype ended up being kind of a stress test. We built it pretty quickly and we loaded up with almost too much clay, and we just left it by the bank overnight to see if it would stay afloat. And thankfully it did, and the plants within it looked pretty healthy, and that gave us the confidence to continue using the same building techniques for the next 2 planters, but iterating and building them more precisely. Then came our launch day, and with the help of Prof. Vale, we managed to launch the boat, and then we loaded our plants and gear on the boat. Launching the planters was surprisingly smooth. We let the planter rafts kind of float in the water behind the boat while we paddled forward. And when we got to the place where we actually want to set up the planters, which is actually the netting that we set up earlier, we basically tied our planter rafts to the netting's wooden frame with some rope, and we left a few meters of slack in the rope. That way we could kind of push the rafts away from the wooden structure, let them float freely, but they wouldn't drift away, and we'll still be able to pull them back in whenever we need to get up close and take a look at them or do something to the rafts, like maintenance and such. And so finally we kind of placed the trays of plants onto the rafts, and we lifted up the rafts and up and over onto the far side of the net. So that's the side where we can't actually go into, and it's the side that's supposed to be closed off with the net and less populated with fish. So hopefully the plants wouldn't get eaten right away. And so we secured everything in place with the rope. And yeah, that was it for the planters. And additionally, as a small side experiment, we also planted 1 water lily directly into a small little cubby that we found on the quarry wall. And this is just to compare how the water lilies would fare in a fixed position by the bank versus out on the water on floating planters. And so from then on, we are just going to monitor the performance of these planters and see whether or not they can continue to float and whether the plants actually thrive in the quarry. which can then give us more confidence to scale this idea up for the giant water lilies.
Looking ahead, our team has 3 main plans for future directions. First, we want to follow up on the floater island trial by working with larger water lilies. This was our initial plan from the start, to try with the giant lilies. But when we went to the shop, they were sold out. The store owner explained that these lilies need to be pre-ordered several months in advance so that they have enough time to prepare the stock. This was an important learning point for us. For our next trip, we will make sure to coordinate early, either through our professor or our translator, so that the order is placed well ahead of time. Once the lilies are secured, we'll also take the chance to re-evaluate the current floating islands, looking closely at what designs worked, which didn't, and what can be improved. Based on these findings, we'll build a new planter island specifically designed for the giant lilies. To give you a sense of scale, these lilies are expected to cost about 500 baht each and can start at around about half a meter in diameter. Over time, they can grow to between 1.5 to 2 meters across. That means the planter island itself must be around 2 meters by 2 meters. Sturdy, stable, and spacious enough to support them. Once they've grown into full size, the lilies can be sold, creating a meaningful profit margin that the village can reinvest into other community-focused initiatives. In other words, this project is not just about creating something beautiful in the water. It is about building a potential income stream, a small but important step towards economic sustainability for the villagers. Second, we plan to improve energy and water management. The senior group before us had already installed solar panels, and these are now generating electricity. The next step is to redirect this supply to power the water pump that was also installed by the seniors. To achieve this, we'll need to extend the current connection. Right now, the electricity runs to the village chief's house. Our plan is to purchase a rod to safely bring the supply across the road and then link it directly to the pump. Because this involves technical and safety requirements, we expect to engage an external vendor to handle the installation properly. Once completed, the system will ensure that the solar energy is fully utilized, making the water pump a reliable and sustainable solution for the community in the long run. Third, the direction of our project also depends on local leadership plans. There are ongoing discussions about building a new platform that extends into the quarry. If this goes ahead, our project may take a short generational break before continuing. While this may sound like a pause, it is actually a positive sign that the community is actively shaping its own priorities. By waiting for their decision, we ensure that our efforts remain aligned with their long-term vision, rather than imposing an external timeline. This way, our project grows hand in hand with local leadership. In summary, our future work focuses on 3 key areas: scaling up the floater island project with giant water lilies, redirecting solar energy to sustain the water pump, and staying responsive to the local leadership's decisions. Together, these efforts build on what has already been achieved, while moving closer towards long-term sustainability for the community.
Right, so those were our future directions. Right now, we are almost a year and a half into the project with a strong collection of pictures and videos. But the thing is, the pictures are kind of random and don't yet form a coherent story. So for our creative practice, the challenge is to decide on both the media form and the themes that would give our project narrative focus. So first of all, we can move ahead with a picture book, which was already part of our original proposal. For this, we can consider 2 genres, the first of which is a children's picture book, which allows us to create a fictionalized, imaginative story, perhaps even something whimsical like a child's journey to the pond. This format can allow readers, especially village children, to connect emotionally and imaginatively with the story, while also giving adults like these children's parents and teachers a platform to spark further discussion on deeper themes as well. The second genre of picture book we can consider is a coffee table book, which is a bit more sophisticated, combining high quality images with short paragraphs and real community stories.
And this format gives us a bit more space to explore serious issues like environmental history or community division. But this idea might be sort of limited, especially by our ability to access villager opinions and to weave their quotes into our mix of photos. So another idea that we have right now is a short documentary, because we have already so many milestone videos and pictures that can kind of be stitched together with narration or even community voices as well. And so this option, it sort of requires a clear narrative arc to tie the clips together, but it's quite possible as well. Finally, we can also take a hybrid exhibition approach, which would mean curating selected photos, showing possibly looping videos on screens, and even displaying the physical artifacts like we use, like the nets, buoys or pipes, things we use in previous construction projects in our previous trips. So in this form, right, the exhibition cannot simply be a visual report. It becomes an experience that invites the audience to interpret and feel our a story of rejuvenating the community space. But I mean, despite the type of media we use, right, the narrative matters more than the production quality. We have considered the following two themes. So the first theme would be division and unity, because we have heard stories on how the pond smell divides the community, but yet the pond itself unites people as a shared resource and common ground. And we were thinking that this juxtaposition could be a good starting point for our story. The second theme we could possibly explore is the pond's history of pollution and how it shaped the environment and the people around it. And so how the community has adapted or maybe even resisted certain elements of policy change and previous attempts at cleaning the pond, etc. So no matter the theme, right, the one of the two themes mentioned earlier, we intend to include personal accounts or imagined perspectives to show that every villager has a stake in the pond. And we aim to use this to make the story a bit more authentic and human, beyond just the images and videos that we took over there. In a nutshell, our next step is to decide whether we wish to present our project as a book, as a film, or an exhibition, or even maybe a combination of these items. And alongside that, which theme will give coherence to the visuals that we currently have on hand. Once we decide these two dimensions, right, the form and the theme, our narrative can finally come together.